Most people are surprised to learn that the #1 cause of death in children in America under the age of 4 is abuse. One of the things that people want to believe is that that is somehow tied to socioeconomic status or where you live in a community, things like that. But what we know to be true is that violence itself, domestic violence in particular, is not related to socioeconomic factors or where you live. It doesn't have boundaries. The government was never made to raise children. None of us would take our children to the DMV or the IRS and drop them off and come back in 10 years and expect them to become good members of society. We would expect them to be messed up. And in fact, that's what the foster care system tends to do, is bring more violence into a child's life. We believe that the answer to this problem is the church, is in always having loving, godly, safe and stable homes ready and available for any child that would come into the system. If 1/2 of 1% of people who attend church on a Sunday would open their home, we would wipe out the foster care system in the United States. And so it's exciting, that's an exciting statistic because we know that we could do it, 1/2 of 1%. It's also a very sad statistic and says a lot about who we are as a church when we cannot find 0.5% of Christians to say we could be part of taking out this one piece of violence. There's so much violence and injustice in our communities, but this one thing we could totally solve and fix and change fundamentally the lives of these children.
I'm Deborah Unruh, and I am the Executive Director of Elizabeth House, a shelter program for pregnant women and their children here in Pasadena. In regards to domestic violence, I think women are afraid to leave. That's probably the biggest issue. It's a secret. People keep it a secret, even in the more affluent parts of society. There are, women in our churches. And when you're pregnant and in a domestic violence situation, it creates an even bigger issue and much greater concern. Not all domestic violence shelters will take a woman that's pregnant. A lot of our women come from foster care, and we're just realizing that so many of these women, especially the young women, have not been parented in a very appropriate way, and so they just know nothing about being a parent themselves. We're doing sometimes what the church cannot do, and so we're an arm of the church, really. To have the church partner along with us is extremely important and valuable. It has shown these women that these people don't even know me, and yet they are investing in my life. They're coming and they're bringing dinner, or bringing meals, or they're throwing a baby shower. It's a pretty strong gesture of saying to them that, you're important and you're valuable, and this is what the church is all about. When I look back, I see that, it was maybe just a moment of being obedient to what the Holy Spirit was telling me to do in my little corner of the world. And I think we all have something that we can give, and that is more than what we think.
Most of the people in prison don't know their fathers, had a terrible relationship with their father, in some way fatherless. So if that's the case, and you put them now into these bad neighborhoods where who is the most successful person? The most successful person is often the person that's the most violent. The person that they see with the most is often the worst possible role model. From a biblical model, a father would have offset that negative image and stereotyping that goes along with that. You remove the father from that equation, guess what happens? Well, this becomes the role model. That child begins to want to be that person. It isn't simply stopping people from shooting people, it's changing the environment that creates an atmosphere where it's okay to drive by and shoot someone. Because no one is born with that propensity. You're not born thinking, I'm gonna grow up and drive by shoot people. But that is something that you can learn. Violence is how you solve problems. That lesson is being taught all across, just that lesson is being taught. Violence is how you solve problems. And many of the kids look around the neighborhoods, and so many people don't make it to 25 years of age. You live differently if you don't think you're gonna live very long. Education changes that. It gives you a new trajectory. It changes where you'll be at 25.
Following 2007 or so, we had a rash of homicides. There was about 10 homicides in the city. All were attributed to gang activity.
The string of violence was just ridiculous. I mean, it seemed as if there were murders almost every week. I know it wasn't like that, but it just felt that way. When the violence started to erupt, we all realized, because we were having these meetings together, that it was impacting everybody, all of us, all of our churches. and we saw it as something that we were all responsible for.
We did pick up another partnership, and that was partnering with the Pasadena Police Department because of the violence in the community.
And that relationship together, the police and the pastors, really sent out a very powerful message to not only the community, to the gang members, and in particular to people who weren't gang members.
We'd get a call from the police chief, and then maybe the next call would be from a family member.
We began to pray over our police department and pray over our city. We began to march in parades together. We knelt down and prayed in the intersection of an area that's known for violence. We were visible, we were active, and we were unified.
Monthly we meet at one location or another. In fact, we've hosted CCC meetings right here at the Pasadena Police Department. And without a doubt, every month, one pastor or more will ask, "Chief, what can we do more?"
About a year ago, we were approached by Ricky Pickens to see if we would be interested as pastors and clergy members to be trained in gang intervention.
You can't just walk in a neighborhood and say, hey, I'm going to start doing gang intervention work, and no one knows who you are. We have this saying that we call an LTO, which is an acronym for license to operate. A license to operate means that the gangs give you a green light, or they give you the okay to come in and work with them, to talk with them.
I began to feel saddened when we would have these funerals, because the young people would fill our churches, standing room only and then some. My heart would always grieve because I knew that these kids only knew the God of the funeral. The God that we serve is so much greater and more loving and bigger than just the funeral God.
Our experience of Brandon is that he was an amazing, amazing young man. There was just something about him. I think we've all met those people, something in their eyes, something in their smile that lets you know that they're special. And Brandon was that kind of a kid. He's the kind of guy that on the sideline, whether you're winning or losing, he was the person who would tell you, we can do it. I understand that he was walking home, or at least walking away from the celebration that evening, when a car drove up and opened fire. And I think there was something about Brandon's death and the time that we were in where people were certain that they needed something else. I think it's important to tell people the truth, and I've attended a lot of funerals where people say, you'll see him again, you'll see her again. Blanket across the board, everybody sitting here today is gonna see Brandon again. That's a false hope, it's not true. But to say those who know Jesus Christ will see Brandon again. And so if you don't know him, you have the opportunity today to see Brandon again. Are you ready to step out of this dark place that we find ourselves in as a community? Are you ready to make a choice for something other than death and children dying in the streets and blood running down the streets of Altadena and Pasadena, of our young people? Are you ready to choose differently? And if you are, you can say today, I'm willing to step out of this dark place and step into the light. Sometimes that's all someone can say yes to in any given moment. And so about 150 people, youth and adults, stood up that day. That was amazing.
The church's role in this is to simply be the church. We don't need the church to do anything other than to be that spiritual hospital that it has always been. The more that the community see the church partnering and working together, sharing of resources, and you can't go wrong when people see that type of fellowship.
We've stopped the infighting or just being concerned about our own little worlds, and we realize that it's the Lord's, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, right. The world and everyone in it. So there's only one church in Pasadena now, and each of us have 150,000 members. That's what we tell people. This type of unity empowers our city. And it gives us a position to be able to pray and to stand in the gap. In one meeting, they'll ask us to pray for a certain thing, but then in another meeting, they'll come back and they'll say, your prayers are working, keep praying. And our goal is to shine in such a way that other cities and other communities will know that they can do this as well.